back to our generosity series. In this video, we focus on paradigm shifts in whole life generosity. In our last module, we started talking about the warfare dimension to generosity. And we are going to dedicate today's conversation to that particular theme. Because like Paul said in Romans chapter 12, verse 2, he says, "Do not conform, therefore, to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." A lot of the things that we struggle with in our walk with Christ as Christians, as well as leaders, come from the mindsets that we carry. And so I'm going to be sharing with you some mindset shifts, some paradigm shifts that you must embrace if you're going to indeed experience whole life generosity as a leader in the different places where God has put you. The first that you must embrace is a change in the way you think, from giving being difficult, being something so challenging to do, to generosity flows from the life of Jesus. We've already seen that in previous modules that we have focused on. A lot of us go around thinking, I'm not very wealthy, and so I find giving very, very difficult, but I choose to do it. It feels like forcing ourselves to go out of something to be able to do another thing. But if we just change the way we see generosity, the way we see whole life generosity as, I was created in the image of a generous God. And because God is an ultimate generous giver, I have inherited that nature, then suddenly we will find that certain realities will become possible in our lives as well. The second mindset shift that we must have is from thinking that giving is about me or about us to realizing that generosity is really about God. Very often we think, I enjoy the good feeling that I get when people smile after I make gifts, I give them things. But that's a selfish and a self-focused way of thinking about giving. Whole life generosity invites us to embrace the truth that God created us to be generous. And when I am being generous, I am being more like Christ. And when you realize that you can indeed embody Him and reveal His glory fully by the way you give of yourself and the things that He has blessed you with, generosity is going to become more feasible for you. The third change in our thinking that we must embrace is from thinking that giving is something that can only go to causes that appeal to us personally, to realizing that generosity is focused more on those things that are close to the heart of God. I always remember this particular incident where one of the things that I had decided I will never give to this thing is the thing that the Spirit of God moved me to give to when I was considering some seed that He had put in my hand. Generosity, dear brother, generosity, dear sister, is not about you. It's about the things that God cares about. And you cannot claim to know all of those things. We must look at Him. We must depend on Him to be able to discern what it is that He is calling us to participate in and consider it the privilege that it really is. Another change in our thinking that we must embrace is from thinking about generosity as an act of giving. When I sit in church sometimes and I listen to how pastors teach about generosity, they talk about actions that people do. We must be able to shift from thinking, okay, I have to give my tithe once a month, I have to give on special occasions, I have to give to God, to realize that it's an invitation to a new way of living, and that we can now begin to continually look for opportunities to be generous because it is a way of living. It is intended to be a lifestyle that we embody as children of a generous Father. The last change in our thinking that we are going to focus on in today's module, we must go from thinking that generosity is something that God wants from us. You know, most of the times we think God wants my this and my that. But we realize in the story of David that we saw a few modules back, that was not his mindset. He understood that all things come from God, and whatever he gave, he was simply giving back to God out of the abundance of what God had already given to him. So we must go from thinking that generosity is something that God wants from us to accepting that it is what God wants for us, because God has freely poured out his grace upon us already, like we saw in the previous modules that we have looked at. And now he desires us to experience the joy, the blessing, the fulfillment that comes from a generous lifestyle. It is an invitation, brothers and sisters, to a change in the way we see things, because until we change the way we think about something, we cannot change the way we act in response to that thing. Which of these 5 mindset shifts do you need to embody the most today?